Everyone having a right to a safe and stable home benefits us all. I come with no other agenda than desperately trying to help people who are in need.
It was meant to be a cheerful royal day, a rare, relaxed escape from protocol. But by the end of it, a royal line had been crossed. What began as innocent childhood banter quickly spiraled into whispered outrage behind palace doors. Prince Louis, the cheeky, lively youngest of the Wales trio, left the gardens in tears. And this time, Prince William didn't just frown, he acted. So what exactly happened? And why has Camilla's granddaughter just been erased from royal favor? Let's break it all down. A picnic with hidden politics. It was supposed to be just another cheerful royal outing. Picnic blankets on Balmoral's manicured lawns, kids running wild and corgis darting between teacups and sandwiches. No official speeches, no stiff protocols, just family time. Or so it seemed. King Charles had organized the event, hoping to bring unity between his bloodline and Camilla's extended family. A well-meaning idea, but one that made Kate, ever the careful mother, quietly uneasy. She'd always been polite, poised, and diplomatic when it came to her children, especially Louis. Her instincts rarely wavered. Prince Louis, the youngest and most spirited of the Wales trio, was in his element, bright-eyed, full of energy, and endlessly charming. He skipped through games and laughter with his usual confidence. His infectious giggles were the soundtrack of the afternoon. Camilla, meanwhile, ensured her own grandchildren were present. Though not royals by blood or title, their growing appearances at royal events hadn't gone unnoticed. Some saw this as her subtle strategy, to blur the lines, to weave her family into the royal fabric. And this picnic felt like one more stitch in that plan. At first, everything seemed light-hearted. Children played, parents chatted, and nannies exchanged gossip over elderflower drinks. But then, something shifted. Kate's posture changed. Her smile paused, her eyes fixed on Louis. He stood still now, face flushed, expression unreadable. Across from him was one of Camilla's granddaughters. No more giggles, no more games, just a moment of tension sharp enough to slice through the summer air. It wasn't clear what had been said, but something had clearly gone wrong. The kind of wrong that mothers notice instantly. Kate began walking, calm but alert. This gathering wasn't just a picnic anymore. It was a mirror reflecting deeper divides. Two families, one throne, and children caught in the crossfire. And as Louis's usual sparkle dimmed, Kate knew this wasn't just innocent playground, teasing. It was the beginning of something far more serious. But what happened next unraveled so quickly, and yet so quietly, that many of adults didn't notice until it was too late. A cruel comment and a crumbling smile. Louis had always been the spirited one, the youngest royal who made even the most serious official events feel a little lighter. At Trooping the Color, he'd yawned mid-parade. On the palace balcony, he once covered his ears and shouted during the fly-past, completely stealing the show. But beneath the cheeky grin and unruly charm was a child deeply connected to his family, especially to his mother, Kate. He adored her, and what happened in the garden that day struck at the heart of that bond. While the adults were preoccupied with tea and royal small talk under the marquee, the children had broken into smaller groups. One patch of grass became an impromptu football field. Another hosted a pretend tea party, complete with toy cups and muddy sandwiches. Louis, bouncing between groups, eventually found himself alone near the rose garden. That's when Camilla's granddaughter approached. It wasn't clear what sparked the exchange. Some say it started with a snide laugh. Others believe it was prompted by Louis's playful attempt at a royal curtsy, something he'd once done jokingly to mimic his mother. But what is certain, according to multiple insiders, is that the moment turned mean, fast. "You really think your mom's going to be queen?" the girl reportedly sneered, her voice loud enough for a few nearby children to hear. "She's just pretending. Everyone knows Camilla's the real one." Louis blinked, confused at first, then hurt. His hands fell to his sides. He looked down at his shoes, and the warmth in his face started to fade. Before he could even formulate a response, she struck again, this time attacking something even more personal. "And what's with the way you walk? Is that your prince training?" Do you think you're better than everyone else because you live in a castle? Witnesses described Louis's face as shifting from confusion to pain. Red flushed his cheeks. His bright, mischievous eyes began to well up. Someone later said he looked crushed, not because the words were cruel, but because he had never expected them from someone who was supposed to be family. One child giggled, another turned awkwardly away. No one intervened, and Louis, trembling, did the only thing a 6-year-old could think to do. He ran, straight toward the edge of the garden, where Kate stood quietly with Charlotte. Before Kate could react, Louis threw himself into her arms, sobbing. His small body shook against her dress as she held him tight, her hand gently cradling the back of his head. Kate didn't need to ask what had happened. The look on Louis's face told her everything. His confidence, his sunshine, it had been stolen, and in its place was a child who felt mocked, misunderstood, and unsafe. For those standing nearby, the moment was jarring. A hush seemed to fall across the gathering. Even the corgis, who had been enthusiastically chasing shadows moments earlier, stood still. Camilla, positioned a few yards away, noticed the scene, but made no move. Whether she didn't understand the gravity of what had just happened, or chose not to, is unclear. But what is clear is this: Kate saw everything. She held Louis close, her expression unreadable, but inside, something snapped, not with panic or dramatic outbursts, but with a deep, simmering fury only a mother knows, the kind that waits, that observes, that remembers. This wasn't just rude playground banter. This was intentional, calculated, echoing words too mature for any child to invent on their own. Kate looked up across the garden. Her gaze found William, and in that unspoken second, everything changed. Kate's silent storm. Kate Middleton is known for her calm, for her grace under pressure, for her ability to smile through scandal and stand firm in royal storms. But no palace training, no charm school diplomacy, no media etiquette could prepare her for what she felt in that moment when Louis collapsed into her arms, face flushed with shame and heartbreak. To outsiders, she remained composed. Her hand gently smoothed his hair, her voice soft as she whispered something into his ear. But anyone who had ever seen a mother snap into protective mode would recognize the look in her eyes. Behind that composed exterior was a storm brewing, cold, deliberate, and powerful. Kate didn't make a scene. There were no dramatic confrontations or public scoldings. Instead, she stood up quietly, took Louis's hand of hers, and gestured for Charlotte with the other. Together, the trio walked back toward the palace. Every step purposeful, every movement composed. But to the trained eye, it was clear. She wasn't retreating. She was repositioning, calculating. Camilla watched them go, but didn't move. Perhaps she didn't know what had just happened. Or perhaps she assumed, wrongly, that it would blow over like a gust of royal gossip. After all, children squabble all the time, right? Not this time. Once inside, Kate led Louis to a private sitting room away from the flurry of royal aides and event coordinators. She knelt to his level, her hands on his shoulders, her eyes locked with his. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said gently, and he did. At first, hesitantly, then with growing confidence as the words poured out. The teasing, the comments about his courtesy, the mocking of his walk, the cruel remark about his mother not being a real queen. And, finally, something Kate hadn't expected. Another insult, whispered under the breath of Camilla's granddaughter. "At least my granny didn't die because of the crown." That was the moment Kate's eyes went cold. It wasn't just childish cruelty. It was deliberate. It was personal. And, worst of all, it was learned from somewhere. From someone. No child speaks that way unless they've heard it at home. That was the detail Kate couldn't shake. Her son wasn't simply hurt by a cousin's teasing. He had been wounded by a legacy, by whispers and rumors passed down like family recipes. It was Diana's memory being used as a punchline, and Louis, too young to understand the full weight of it, had still felt its sting. Kate didn't cry. She didn't shout, but the air in the room shifted. Within the hour, she summoned her private secretary. Her instructions were simple. Clear her schedule. Cancel every engagement. No school runs. No charity visits. No ribbon cuttings. She was staying with Louis. But even more urgently, she called for William. When he arrived later that evening at Adelaide Cottage, Kate met him at the door, her face pale and firm. She led him inside. Louis had already gone to bed. The conversation that followed, according to an insider, was the most emotionally charged exchange they've had in years. She laid everything bare, every word Louis repeated, every expression, every flash of pain, and she didn't hold back. "You're the heir," she reportedly said. "It's time to start acting like it. This family protects its own. I will not let this go. If you don't take action, I will." She reminded him of Diana, of how silence had cost too much, of how the institution had failed her, and how history could repeat itself if they didn't draw a line. She wasn't asking for revenge. She was demanding boundaries. Kate's message was clear. This wasn't just about Louis. It was about dignity, about family, about finally ending the quiet favoritism Camilla had spent years weaving into royal life. William said little at first. He simply listened. But his face said everything, and by the time he left the room, the storm that had started with Louis's tears had become a royal reckoning. But what silent power move did William make after Louis's tears sparked a royal reckoning? Stay tuned to find out. William's turning point. Prince William had faced many pressures in his life: public scrutiny, royal expectations, the shadows of both his father's reign and his mother's tragedy. But nothing rattled him quite like seeing his youngest child broken. Louis wasn't just hurt, he was humiliated, and that changed everything. After Kate recounted the incident in chilling detail, right down to the jab at Diana's memory, William didn't speak for a long time. He sat with his hands clasped, staring at the floor. Kate had said it all. There was nothing left to explain. What remained now was a decision. He wasn't just a future king anymore. He was a father, and the moment called for more than diplomacy. The very next morning, while the palace buzzed with routine engagements and scheduled appearances, William quietly summoned his most senior aides to a private study in Kensington Palace. There was no media alert, no fanfare, just the sound of doors shutting and muffled footsteps behind closed walls. Inside that room, he laid out everything, calmly, clearly, without anger, but with unmistakable resolve. There was an incident involving Prince Louis, he began, and there will be consequences. He wasn't looking for apologies. He didn't want a carefully worded statement or a mediated resolution. What he wanted was accountability and distance, effective immediately. The young girl who insulted Louis would no longer be welcome at royal events involving his children. No holiday invites, no charity appearances, no symbolic walks alongside Charlotte and George. Her quiet integration into the royal circle had come to a full stop, and then came the headline move. Any pending consideration for honorary status, titles, or privileges connected to Camilla's granddaughter. The aides were stunned. Not because they disagreed, but because William was no longer asking for consensus. He was making decisions, like a leader, like a protector, like a father who had finally drawn the line. This wasn't just a reaction to a playground insult. It was a message to the monarchy itself. Legacy doesn't come from association. It comes from behavior and loyalty. It wasn't a request. It was a notification. For the first time in years, William wasn't deferring to the crown. He was standing in front of it, and whether the institution liked it or not, the balance of royal power had just shifted. But what shocking message did William send that shifted the balance of royal power forever? Stay glued to your screen. The stripping of a royal future. The next 24 hours sent ripples through the palace corridors like a silent earthquake. There were no press conferences, no official statements, but those in the know felt the tremor and understood the gravity. By midday, William's decision had been quietly communicated across key royal departments. Camilla's granddaughter, once gently positioned for honorary appearances and subtle title discussions, was now erased from any future plans involving the monarchy's next generation. No pageantry roles, no invites to Trooping the Color, no mention in ceremonial rosters. She had been, in royal terms, cut out. For years, Camilla had been slowly weaving her family into the royal spotlight. Her grandchildren, while not royal by blood, had walked in coronation processions, appeared in high-profile photos, and attended intimate palace events. It wasn't official. but it was strategic, a quiet campaign to solidify their proximity to the throne. But William saw through it. And now, after one cruel moment directed at Louis, he wasn't just pulling back the curtain, he was shutting the door. The young girl who made Louis cry would no longer be allowed near him or his siblings. Not on birthdays, not on holidays, not even in staged photo ops. This wasn't a punishment, this was a boundary, a signal that royal favor isn't granted by association, but by integrity. And perhaps most striking of all, William hadn't asked for the king's permission. That's what stunned even the most senior palace aides. For decades, royal hierarchy dictated that Charles would approve or deny major family matters. But this time, William had acted first and informed later, because to William, this wasn't about royal tradition, it was about a child. He wasn't interested in half-hearted apologies or neatly worded excuses. As one aide later put it, William didn't want an apology. He wanted space. He wanted peace for his children. By the time Charles read the letter, the decision had already been enforced. And for Camilla's granddaughter, whatever quiet future she imagined alongside the next generation of royals had vanished. Without ceremony, without compromise, and without a single word spoken to the press. Camilla's meltdown and Charles's silence. The letter arrived at Clarence House mid-morning, delivered by a senior royal courier with an unusually somber expression. Camilla, seated in her private drawing room with a half-drunk cup of tea, accepted it without ceremony. But as she read William's words, her hands began to tremble. Her granddaughter, barred. Her family's slow, deliberate integration into royal life. Undone, the honorary status she had quietly lobbied for. Gone. At first, she didn't believe it. This has to be a mistake, she snapped at an aide. Charles would never allow this. But it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. And it came with no request for permission, only notification. William hadn't consulted. He had acted. Fury overtook confusion. Camilla stormed through the halls of Clarence House, demanding explanations, questioning staff, and railing against what she called a personal vendetta. Her voice echoed down the corridors, an unusual breach of her carefully composed demeanor. Her next move was swift. She marched straight to the study, letter in hand, demanding that Charles intervene. "He's your son," she reportedly shouted. "But this is over the line. This is punishment, not protocol." But Charles, weary and visibly strained, offered no support. His response was quiet and final. "I will not overrule him," he said. It wasn't said with malice or indifference. It was said with the weight of understanding. William had taken a stand not just as a father, but as the future of the crown. Charles, now caught between his wife and his heir, chose silence over confrontation. To Camilla, it felt like betrayal. After years of standing beside Charles through scandal and scrutiny, she was now isolated, her family pushed back into the shadows she fought so hard to escape. And worse still, she suspected Kate was behind it all. In her eyes, this wasn't just William protecting his son. It was Kate drawing lines in the sand. Camilla thought she had already walked across. That night, Camilla canceled her appearance at a charity gala, citing fatigue. But inside palace walls, the whispers had already begun. The queen consort's influence was fading. And the new era? It had just announced itself. With no crown, no speech, just a father defending his son. But what was the public and media's reaction after William's bold move inside palace walls went public? Stay glued to your screen. The public chooses sides. The royal family may move in silence, but the public does not. Within hours of William's quiet decision reaching palace walls, the story began to leak. At first, it trickled through royal insiders and anonymous sources. But soon, it flooded headlines and dominated social media. Prince Louis bullied. William bans Camilla's granddaughter from royal life. Royal rift. Prince William takes bold step to protect his son. Queen consort's family snubbed after garden incident. The tabloids couldn't get enough. But unlike other royal dramas, this one struck a different chord. It wasn't about power struggles, scandals, or protocol breaches. It was about a child, and the public knew where they stood. Hashtags exploded across platforms. Hashtag protect Louis. Hashtag not your queen. Hashtag William was right. Support came from every direction. Parenting bloggers praised William for putting his son's well-being above royal optics. Teachers spoke about how bullying at a young age leaves lasting scars. Mental health advocates applauded Kate for taking a firm, composed stance without seeking media sympathy. One viral tweet summed it up best. Prince Louis may be the youngest, but today, he taught the monarchy what strength looks like. Good for William and Kate. As the outpouring grew, so did the comparisons. Diana's legacy resurfaced. Many remembered how she, too, had shielded her boys from the rigidity of palace life. Now, it seemed, her son was carrying that same protective fire. This time, not with public defiance, but private decisiveness. Artists began sharing illustrations of Louis, standing tall, a small golden crown resting gently on his head. Others posted side-by-sides of Diana with William as a child, next to images of Kate with Louis in her arms. The visual message was clear. The monarchy's next chapter was being written, and this time, it came with boundaries. And then, the backlash toward Camilla began. Public sentiment, which had slowly warmed to her over the years, turned cold. Memes flooded in, painting her as tone-deaf, disconnected, and even opportunistic. Polls showed a sharp drop in her popularity, while support for William and Kate soared. The Queen Consort's silence, or refusal to take responsibility, was seen not as restraint, but arrogance. Even within royal circles, staffers reportedly shifted their loyalty. Some aides quietly requested transfers to Kensington. Media outlets that once tiptoed around Camilla's narrative now openly questioned her family's place in royal affairs. But the most telling moment came on a quiet Sunday, as William, Kate, George, Charlotte, and Louis stepped out of their car for a church service. The crowd lining the path burst into spontaneous applause. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was soft, knowing, and respectful. A gesture of support, of alignment. Louis looked up, a bit unsure. Kate leaned down and whispered something only he could hear. But the message that hung in the air was unmistakable. The monarchy isn't just surviving change, it's choosing it. Camilla's quiet retreat from the spotlight. In the days that followed, Camilla retreated from the public eye. Officially, it was explained as health-related fatigue, but insiders whispered a different truth. She was wounded, not in body, but in pride. Once confident in her growing influence within the firm, she now found herself on the outside looking in. Public sympathy had vanished. Longtime staff distanced themselves. Media allies grew silent. Appearances were canceled. Invitations quietly rescinded. Her decades-long strategy to weave her family into royal legacy had unraveled in a single afternoon. And while she kept smiling at the cameras when necessary, those close to her say she never truly forgave William or Kate. But inside palace walls, one thing was certain. Camilla had been outmaneuvered, not with scandal, but with principle. The Queen Consort had lost the court of public opinion. So, what do you think? Did Prince William go too far? Or was this the bold move the monarchy needed to protect its future? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold royal revelations.